it's a good bounce back win for us today. I thought we started the game with the right tone on the defensive end, and so that was that was by design for us to get back to.
Just when it looked like the storm around Team USA and Caitlyn Clark was finally settling, a new shockwave tied to NBC has reportedly sent coaches, executives, and the old guard of the WNBA into full-blown panic mode. And this time, it is not about a missed pass, a roster tweak, or a harmless talking point. It is about power, money, and who actually controls the future of women's basketball. Behind closed doors, we are hearing whispers of anger and disbelief because the one outcome the establishment worked tirelessly to avoid is unfolding in real time. And it is being fueled by billions of dollars now flooding into the league. They tried to keep the focus on systems over stars. They pushed experience over momentum, tradition over hype, and they attempted to humble the rookie phenomenon by leaving her behind when the Olympic lights turned on. But the latest strategic move from the broadcast giant has made one thing painfully clear. You cannot contain a tidal wave with old rules and fragile egos. The carefully managed narrative that Caitlyn Clark needed to wait, learn, and fall in line has been shattered by the same people who write the checks and set the schedules. If the reports are accurate, the mood inside the Team USA camp has turned explosive as the realization sets in that gold medals may matter less to television partners than one Caitlyn Clark warm-up sequence. But to understand why this announcement hit like a bomb, we need to examine the quiet power shift that has been building under the surface of women's basketball for months. Because this moment is not about one broadcast decision. It is about a changing hierarchy, a collapsing old order. The fault lines that are cracking open today did not appear overnight. They trace back to a decision that was framed as routine but landed like an earthquake the moment it was announced. When the Olympic roster was finalized, the official explanation was simple, almost rehearsed. This was a basketball decision. Head coach Cheryl Reeve and the selection committee emphasized defense, chemistry, and experience. They spoke about veterans who had survived pressure, players who understood the grind, and systems that required discipline over flash. On the surface, it sounded reasonable. But beneath that explanation sat a reality that fans immediately sensed did not line up. Leaving the most visible, most talked about, and most commercially powerful player in women's basketball at home felt less like strategy and more like protectionism. Analysts and insiders quickly began asking uncomfortable questions. How do you justify excluding the single biggest audience draw in the sport during an Olympic cycle where ratings matter more than ever? The answer, whether intended or not, exposed a widening gap between basketball logic and business reality. NBC, the network holding the Olympic broadcast rights, was reportedly furious. They had spent months preparing for the Caitlyn Clark effect, projecting rating spikes, sponsorship integrations, and cross-platform storytelling built around her presence. When the roster dropped without her name, it wasn't just a sporting disappointment. It was a financial problem. Reports surfaced almost immediately that executives were scrambling, trying to understand why the league and federation would voluntarily undercut their most marketable asset. But the coaching staff held firm. They won the gold medal. In their minds, the outcome validated the process. Standing atop the podium, medals around their necks, they believed the criticism would fade. They believed winning would reassert authority. That the system worked, that the rookie had been reminded of her place in the hierarchy. But what they underestimated was how little winning alone matters in a media ecosystem driven by attention. While the coaching staff celebrated execution and discipline, the networks were studying spreadsheets. And those numbers told a story no chalkboard could erase. Olympic viewership was respectable, even strong by traditional standards, but it failed to approach the cultural frenzy generated by a routine Indiana Fever regular season game featuring Caitlyn Clark. That contrast became impossible to ignore. It reframed the gold medal as a symbolic victory rather than a commercial one. And once the new media rights deal, valued at over $2 billion, officially kicked in, priorities shifted fast. NBC and its partners reportedly began restructuring coverage plans, marketing budgets, and production strategies around one unavoidable conclusion: the audience follows Clark. So the cameras will too. Whispers began circulating about what that shift would actually look like. Dedicated camera angles tracking her movement even when she doesn't have the ball. Documentary-style follow-along segments woven into broadcasts. Primetime scheduling dictated less by standings and more by her availability. This wasn't subtle. It was a declaration. And for the traditional power brokers in women's basketball, it felt like a direct challenge. Coaches like Reeve have spent decades building a philosophy centered on collectives, systems, and the belief that no individual supersedes the team. But the network's message was blunt. We paid for the superstar, and we intend to show the superstar. That statement alone represents a seismic shift in who holds leverage. This shift doesn't remove a coach's ability to make tactical decisions. They can bench her. They can limit minutes. They can exclude her from certain opportunities, but what they cannot do is stop the cameras from turning toward her. That loss of narrative control is what insiders say triggered the initial explosion of anger. Authority in modern sports is no longer just about rotations and schemes. It is about visibility. When corporate partners prioritize one player over an entire structure, it erodes the traditional chain of command. Coaches begin to feel bypassed, reduced to caretakers of a product whose direction is dictated elsewhere, and that realization is deeply unsettling. Layered on top of this is a reality few want to say out loud. Jealousy. It's uncomfortable, but it fits. You have veterans who spent a decade or more grinding overseas, flying commercial, living out of suitcases, building the league piece by piece. And then a rookie arrives, and suddenly networks behave as if she invented the sport. When NBC signals it is doubling down on Clark, it confirms every quiet fear. That everyone else is now a supporting character. For a Team USA staff that prides itself on collectivism, this is an existential threat. How do you preach sacrifice when the ecosystem rewards singular stardom? That contradiction fractures locker rooms and places coaches in an impossible position. And this was only the beginning of the fallout. The backlash that followed was not driven by ego alone. It was fueled by fear. Fear of becoming irrelevant in a system that no longer values what you were taught to prioritize. When a gold medal team fails to dominate headlines, when the player who stayed home commands more attention than those who stood on the podium, it forces a brutal question. What is victory worth in the open market? Television does not reward merit. It rewards interest. And Caitlyn Clark generates interest at a scale no defensive scheme can replicate. Coaches know this, even if they resent it. They also know what comes next. Endorsement deals. Media appearances. Side projects. Opportunities that funnel toward one center of gravity. The veterans see the attention narrowing, and they fear being left with accolades but no leverage. Inside the Team USA setup, reports suggest that some high-profile figures view NBC's pivot as a betrayal. They believe primetime exposure is earned through winning. But the reality is harsher. Broadcast partners operate on algorithms, not ideals. They measure clicks, retention, and cultural relevance. And by those metrics, Clark is untouchable. The explosion we keep hearing about is not a tantrum. It is an awakening, the old guard realizing they cannot outplay an algorithm. They can dominate opponents. They can win by 30. But they cannot compete with a phenomenon that commands attention without trying. For people who built their lives around the belief that winning solves everything, this realization is terrifying. Looking forward only intensifies the anxiety. The 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles loom large, and NBC will again be the broadcaster. Ask yourself honestly. Do you believe the network will allow a selection committee to exclude Caitlyn Clark from a home soil Olympics? The answer is obvious. And this current strategic shift feels less like a suggestion and more like a warning. Get aligned or get left behind. Coaches who made the 2024 snub are reportedly beginning to understand that their autonomy has evaporated. When a network is writing checks of this magnitude, influence follows. No coach wants a television executive dictating decisions. But when billions are at stake, resistance becomes symbolic rather than effective. The power dynamic has inverted. Players and coaches once held leverage because they were the product. Now the product has a face. And that face belongs to one person. Everyone else facilitates the broadcast. It is a difficult reality to accept, especially when physical tolls and emotional resentment collide. If veterans feel disrespected by the media focus, that frustration does not vanish. It shows up on the court. We have already seen flashes of it. Hard fouls. Increased physicality. A willingness to test boundaries. When opponents believe the media has tilted the game, they sometimes respond by trying to impose control physically. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. The media amplifies the physicality. The drama drives views. The views justify more coverage. And the cycle feeds itself. For the Team USA coaches, this transformation feels like a betrayal of stewardship. They believe the game is turning into spectacle. That strategy and discipline are being replaced by narrative and controversy, and yet, they are powerless to stop it. Fans are engaged at unprecedented levels. Ratings validate the approach. The reality television comparison is uncomfortable because it feels accurate. Basketball remains the foundation, but drama has become the accelerator. And accelerators are addictive. The offseason only complicates matters further. Clark now has options. She does not need to rely exclusively on traditional structures. If the WNBA or Team USA ecosystem becomes hostile, she can redirect her brand. She can prioritize ventures where she holds equity. NBC understands this leverage and wants to be aligned with her, not constrained by institutional loyalty. If Clark chooses alternative paths, exhibition series, or emerging leagues, networks will follow. Rights deals would materialize overnight. This terrifies traditional power holders. Because if she creates an independent ecosystem, their leverage collapses entirely. They need her inside the system to legitimize it. But by trying to humble her, they may have accelerated her independence. This announcement is confirmation that she is bigger than the structure that attempted to contain her. For coaches who preach that no one is bigger than the team, this is a philosophical defeat. In modern sports, that motto no longer survives contact with reality. The fans, unsurprisingly, have picked a side. Comment sections and social platforms have turned into battlegrounds. Many view the network's move as karma. After years of dismissive commentary and condescending remarks from established voices, seeing NBC pivot so aggressively toward Clark feels like vindication. To them, this is the market correcting a mistake. The snub felt personal, and the response now feels poetic. That public sentiment only deepens frustration inside Team USA. Being criticized by fans is one thing. Being overruled by your broadcast partner is another. The divide between basketball purists and paying customers has never been wider. Coaches speak about rotations and legacy. Audiences want logo threes, and the audience is winning. Cheryl Reeves stands at the center of this storm. Wearing dual hats as Team USA coach and Minnesota Lynx coach, her influence is undeniable. Critics argue that this dual role created conflicts of interest, protecting familiar players and preserving an established hierarchy. When she dismissed claims that the snub was personal, fans rejected the explanation. Now, with NBC effectively overriding her philosophy, it likely feels like a personal defeat. This moment represents more than anger. It marks the end of an era. The coach-led dynasty is giving way to a player-driven entertainment model. The old guard remembers begging for airtime, buying their own gear, playing in obscurity. Watching a rookie receive red carpet treatment reopens wounds that never healed. The uncomfortable truth is financial. The league struggled for decades, subsidized, overlooked, and underfunded. It wasn't until Clark arrived that the economics shifted dramatically. NBC is not a charity. It is a business pursuing return on investment. And Clark delivers. Coaches fighting this shift are effectively fighting capitalism. History suggests that battle rarely ends well. The emergence of the unrivaled league adds another wrinkle. Founded by prominent players, it aims to create a profitable off-season alternative. But reports indicate that Clark's participation is crucial. Without her, the ceiling remains low. This creates an awkward dependency. Players who once supported the system that sidelined her now need her to validate their venture. If she opts out, their bottom line suffers. This announcement reinforces that she holds the leverage. Inside Team USA, fingers are reportedly pointing everywhere. Media blame. Fan blame. Quiet self-reflection. Some are likely realizing they miscalculated by alienating the sport's biggest star. They believed they could humble her. Instead, they elevated her into a symbol and a business force. The upcoming season will test the league's psychology. Financial success paired with internal resentment is a volatile mix. How NBC navigates it is simple. Ignore complaints. Follow the money. Focus the cameras where attention lives. We may soon see broadcasts telling one story while coaches try to tell another on the court. That friction is irresistible television. This is why engagement is soaring. It is not just basketball. It is serialized drama with real stakes. Millions of dollars. Careers. Legacies. The explosion we are witnessing is not an anomaly. It is a symptom. As playoffs approach and future Olympic cycles loom, the tension will only intensify. Closed-door meetings will continue. Complaints will be voiced. But the signal has been sent. The game has changed. Money has spoken. And attention is the new currency. Ultimately, this reaction to the NBC announcement is the sound of an old system collapsing. For decades, respect was earned through patience and silence. You waited. You complied. Eventually, you were rewarded. Caitlyn Clark did not skip the line by demand. She skipped it because the audience pulled her forward. Coaches tried to enforce rules designed for a different era. They lost. The scoreboard has already lit up. The anger, the rumors, the reported blow-ups are just the aftershock. As long as ratings drive decisions, the hierarchy is clear. Caitlyn Clark is no longer part of the system. She is the system. And as the season moves toward the playoffs and the next Olympic cycle comes into focus, this tension is not fading. It is accelerating. Coaches can shut the doors, circle the wagons, and air their grievances in private meetings. But the message has already been delivered. The landscape has shifted. The money has made its choice. And the future belongs to whoever can command attention in a crowded media world. What we are witnessing after the NBC announcement is not a tantrum. It is a turning point, the sound of an old operating system crashing. Because for generations, women's basketball functioned as a closed ecosystem where respect was earned through patience, hierarchy, and silence. You waited, you complied, you paid your dues, and only then were you allowed into the spotlight. Caitlyn Clark did not break those rules out of rebellion. She bypassed them because the audience demanded something different, and the institutions tried to apply outdated logic to a new reality and failed. The NBC move is simply the scoreboard flashing the final score. The frustration, the leaked arguments, the whispered confrontations are just the final gasps of a fading power structure. They can argue, they can rage, and they can hold as many closed-door summits as they want. But as long as the cameras answer to ratings and revenue, Caitlyn Clark is steering the ship now. No debate.